Hello, I'm Ben Emlyn Jones, and I'm here at the headquarters of the High Wycombe Paranormal Group, and I'm here to speak to a very, very interesting man. His name is Nick Hayes. Hi, Nick.
Hi, Ben. How are you doing? You all right?
All right, thanks. Good to have you here at the High Wycombe Paranormal Meetup Group.
Good to be here, thanks.
Now, you're a ufologist, but you're one with a difference. So what makes you different to most other people within ufology?
Well, the things I actually record are in the invisible, they're not in the visible spectrum at all.
They can't actually be seen with human eyes?
No, that's right, yeah, outside the visible light spectrum.
Okay. We should explain that light, which we see with our eyes, is just one part of a much wider spectrum of radiation, isn't it?
Well, that's right, yeah, you've got the red through to violet, and also you've got the ultraviolet beyond the violet, then you've got the infrared before the red, and both of which can't be seen by humans.
So so it all depends on the wavelength of the actual radiation.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And these particular objects, they either radiate or reflect light or radiation, a light outside the wavelength that our eyes can see.
Yeah, they seem to reflect, and some of them are self-illumined, so...
Right. So how do you detect them if they can't be seen?
Well, I use a Geiger counter for detection purposes as well, and I also use an attraction device, which is a cloudbuster. And basically I get a hit on the Geiger counter when they're near, so I start filming in that general direction.
And you film with a special camera that can pick up wavelengths outside visible light?
Yeah, I film with an infrared camera, which basically is a standard camera which has been sent off and been turned into an infrared camera. Basically there's an infrared filter inside which blocks the visible light spectrum, apart from a small amount of red that appears just before the infrared. And then of course it passes a little bit of the red and the infrared as well. And I've also got a full spectrum camcorder which I use different filters on, infrared, ultraviolet, and also a mix of infrared and ultraviolet.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting because several pieces of footage have been declassified from NASA that have been taken aboard the International Space Station and aboard the space shuttle missions, which show UFOs just appearing and vanishing, which is very, very interesting. It's quite similar to what you yourself have picked up, and some of them look quite similar actually to what you picked up. But could this be simply because they're phasing their wavelengths through different through the spectrum, so they appear and disappear? Is that what they do?
It might be. With the tether incident, I believe NASA were recording with ultraviolet sensitive tape at the time, and these things did appear on the ultraviolet tape.
So this is what in science fiction is called a cloaking device, where an object can make itself appear invisible. And I believe that DARPA are working on something a bit like that. But so if we can't see them, does this mean they're quite common? Because I know that you've been very successful. I mean, when you set up your own experiments, you seem almost every time you go out with your camera, you pick up something of interest. And you've written a book, which you've got some of the pictures.
Yeah, well, you've got to remember that I've been filming like 7 or 8 hours a day, and I filmed for 5 years non-stop with multiple cameras. So yeah, I pick things up most of the time, but you know, sometimes they're not in the range, sometimes they're too small. But there's a lot of things out there. I believe there's a whole lot of stuff going on in different dimensions at the same time.
Are these objects, I mean, are they like flying saucers? Are they flying triangles?
I've actually filmed some saucer-like objects and some bell-like objects, but they're always very, very high in the sky. So I started sort of concentrating a bit lower in the sky, above the treetops. A lot of the things I've actually captured almost seem like biological UFOs. A lot of them are fish-like forms, and some of them are just very strange objects which you can't really put into any kind of category at all.
Now, you're very much inspired by a very controversial figure from the past called Trevor James Constable.
Yeah.
And I know that he had a theory that a lot of what we call UFOs are actually, rather than being mechanical devices or transports, which is what they appear, many of them appear to be, the visible ones, these are actually some form of life. Is that right?
That's right, existing in a plasma-like state. Yeah, they seem to have their form in a plasma-type state, and this is why they show up in the infrared. They seem to be made of like a heat substance, rather than being a physical construct.
Because we always assume that life as we know it is going to be it's going to be material, and it's going to be solid, consisting of cells like our own bodies do.
Well, that's right, yeah.
But also that it'll be perceivable, it'll be visible. I mean,
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it was a great surprise to me when I actually first heard the idea that UFOs could be anything other than ships from other planets. And when I started discovering Trevor's work and found out that these things, I mean, some of them even look like amoeba. Like something that you'd see, you know, unicellular type things. It was quite a shock. I'd always thought that UFOs were ships from other planets, and I'd never even thought that they could be anything other than that. So, so when I started filming, doing what Trevor did, I wasn't that surprised when I caught similar things to Trevor. Although I've caught so many other things that Trevor didn't catch. I've caught a lot of fish-like forms that look like actual fish.
Yeah.
Because of course you've got the skyfish, but these things are actually more fish-like than any of the skyfish stuff that I've caught.
They do look remarkably like fish. I mean, I know that this is your own terminology, and I know it's predictably the BBC have. Well, maybe we'll talk about that. But the BBC, you were on the BBC. You were on the Radio Oxford. What's the was it Malcolm?
Malcolm Boyden show.
Malcolm Boyden show. Yeah. And you were a company when you went on the air with him, but also on the show was a great friend of High Wycombe Paranormal, the one and only Professor Brian Cox, and of course what was the headline? Abingdon man sees sea monsters in the sky or something ridiculous.
Because, sea creatures in the skies over Abingdon and Radley. Well, it's because one of them looked like a jellyfish. It actually did. It looked like a jellyfish with tentacles, and then I began capturing the fish-like forms. I mean, I didn't actually say that to him. That was his interpretation of it. Well,
technically, if you, I mean, theoretically, if some creature existed that was light in its body was light enough for it to be suspended in the air, like if it was made of something that had no mass or very little mass, then it would quite likely look like a jellyfish, because these are creatures that are a neutral buoyancy under the sea.
Well, this is right. And if you look, I've always thought of the sea being like the sky being like a sea anyway. So it doesn't surprise me that you get sort of sea creatures, because nature doesn't seem to like a vacuum. It always fills it with something, whether that's in the physical world or in the non-physical world.
I mean, it's a very interesting short story. I mean, we've been discussing this, written by a man called Arthur Conan Doyle, who was a great psychical researcher and paranormal investigator of his time. Member of the Society of Psychical Research. He wrote the books, the Sherlock Holmes stories as well. He's most famous for that. He wrote a book in 1913. What's the title?
Horror at the Heights, wasn't it?
Horror of the Heights, yeah. Which is about a pilot, a man in an aeroplane who flies to a great altitude, and he encounters some pretty frightening creatures which attack his aircraft. And
sound very similar to the things that Trevor Jones Constable first talked about.
I mean, these things happen because pilots have reported strange things that appear not to be mechanical, that appear to be biological.
Oh, definitely.
They're called gremlins.
Definitely.
They use the term gremlins, which very often they appear as sort of winged humanoid type creatures, like from the famous film by Joe Dante. They've read. But obviously, like some of these things were caused by basically the men suffering from hypoxia because they were flying to such a great height.
Right.
And indeed, when aircraft came along with pressurised cabins, the sightings of these phenomena were reduced. However, they didn't go away, and to this day, they're still sometimes reported.
Well, it could be that these guys, because of the state they're in, were actually able to look into this other realm rather than being figments of their imagination.
Well, that's a good point, because like when it comes into shamanic dancing and things like that, But now, you, what's interesting is that you think you have... obviously, like unless you triangulate, it's impossible to get like a correct range on these objects. However, you do set your focus. You set the focus of your camera at treetop level or so.
When I'm filming in the infrared, with the ultraviolet, I actually film above the rooftops and block. I use a sun obliteration technique. I block the sun behind the roof, and I zoom in slightly towards the edge of the roof and focus on the roof. And this brings into effect what I call the illumination zone. And anything that comes above or just into this is visible just for a fraction of a second in the ultraviolet, and after that it disappears completely. Not all of them, but many of them are just visible just for a fraction of a second as they're illuminated by the ultraviolet, and then they become invisible once more.
That's quite something, because when we see these objects, some of them are quite distinct. There's one particular object that does appear to be metallic.
Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah.
To me, it looks like rather like a tin can or one of those light bulbs. It's obviously not that, but it has like these rods coming out of it, and it looks like an electric plug or something.
Yeah, it's a strange one.
With
a
strange halo of plasma around it.
Yeah.
Now, based on that, you can judge it as being basically perfectly in focus, which means it's probably something quite small, which is quite low altitude.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you put, I filmed a butterfly above that edge of the roof where that thing is, and to be quite honest with you, a butterfly was probably about 50 times as small as that. So that thing's quite big, and I think it's in the distance.
Do you think it could be further away?
I think, not massively far away, because the depth of field of the camcorder is sort of limited to a certain extent. But I think it's further away than the actual edge of the, because I'm actually looking up at 45 degrees straight into the sky. So anything passing into the illumination zone is illuminated, I'm not sure how high it goes, but I don't think the depth of field allows me to film things miles away. I mean, it will film an aeroplane that's miles away, but it looks obviously very tiny. But this is in focus, as you say. It comes more into focus in the second shot, I think.
Now, these things, obviously, you've recorded a lot of images of these objects, but are these things everywhere, or do you use certain techniques that may make it more likely? You mentioned a cloudbuster.
Well, I've found with infrared, I film in infrared, and the cloudbuster seems to attract these things. But with the ultraviolet, it seems that a lot of these things are travelling on some kind of invisible etheric flow. And when they're lit up by the sun at a certain angle, they become visible. But they seem to be part of this etheric flow, which goes from west to east, according to my calculations.
Now, a cloudbuster, we should point out, is a device invented by Wilhelm Reich, which uses orgone energy. Basically, it's a channeling orgone energy. And it's quite a simple device, but it's very effective, and it can be used for modifying weather. I mean, it's been used to, relieve droughts, for example, in areas where there's
well, that's right. Yeah, I mean, it's just an array of pipes really that are put on a turntable-like thing, and they can be aimed at any direction. My basic cloudbuster are just 3 pipes. Which I just put straight into water, but obviously the water's running all the time. You keep the water running, but I use an old dustbin and fill that with water. Then I've got a pipe going from it, and the water goes in via a hose pipe, and then the water comes out, and I recycle the water around, and it keeps a constant movement. And the pipes are actually draw pipes. They apparently draw they shoot like a ray up, and they actually draw the energy back into the pipes, the orgone energy, and which helps break up the clouds.
Yeah, so you mentioned that there's these objects often travel in a particular direction.
West to east. I found when I'm filming in the ultraviolet. Although there is a few that travel the other way, but in the infrared, I found they seem to travel in all directions. But obviously, it seems to be a different density of the infrared. Obviously, it's one end of the colour spectrum, more dense the infrared, and obviously the ultraviolet's more high in frequency. So there does seem to be a difference between the two sort of rounds, so to speak.
Are you sure you're not just accidentally filming things such as insects and you get these strange effects because of the artifacts of digital photography?
Well, this is something I suspected at first when I first started filming, but I have actually researched insects, and as you know, I've made a film which is on YouTube. Was it Skyfish Fact or Fiction? And I have actually filmed many different insects, and they are actually elongated by the recording process, the interlaced video recording, and that does stretch the insects out, and you get multiple repeats. But I actually am very interested in insects, so I record insects and birds as well. So I know that the stuff that I'm capturing, they're not insects, and also they don't show up. I don't say anything, and they don't show up on the standard recording, which is recording most of the time in the visible light spectrum. And also insects, don't make Geiger counters go off.
Yeah, that's right. So you've actually, these images you picked up, I mean, you've managed to put them into categories. So there's one you call skyfish. What are they actually like? Do they live up to their name? Are they fish-like?
The forms that I've caught in the ultraviolet are very fish-like. They seem to have fins and tails, whereas the things I call skyfish that are in the infrared, a lot of them look like long torpedo-like creatures with fins on the side. So they're not as fish-like. But I've caught many fish-like forms. They do look like fish. They have tail sections. And the things I call the spinning jennies, they're basically like a flat fish, like a manta ray. And instead of using the wings to fly, they fly nose down, and they spin their tail and their wings like a helicopter. And they fly in groups together. I've got footage of whole groups of these flying over the treetops.
There's the plasmatic gliders as well.
Yeah. They're like a piece of paper. They fly in a V shape, either a V shape that way, or they can just look like a normal piece of paper that's going through the sky. They also fold themselves into paper airplane shapes, but they're like fluidic. It's almost like a fluidic paper, and they seem to be their own light source as well. But I've got quite a bit of footage of the plasmatic gliders. I've made an actual video film for YouTube. It's called Spinning Jennies and Plasmatic Gliders. You'll see whole swarms of these things flying. Now, the plasmatic gliders seem to fly singularly by themselves. I've never seen them in groups, whereas the spinning jennies seem to fly in a group. Sometimes you'll get the plasmatic gliders tagging along with a group of spinning jennies. And at first I thought they were pretty much the same thing until I really looked into them and slowed the footage down.
Now, you capture these images from your home, which is in Abingdon, Oxfordshire. Has anyone else from other parts of the world repeated your experiments and got similar results?
Well, yeah.
Apart from Trevor James comes to
there was the GRCU, which was an Italian research group led by Luciano Bocconi, There's him, and there was another group in Italy, and also there was a Romanian group led by Florin Georgița, and they actually used cloudbusters, and they recorded some very similar things to what I've recorded. And I think there are plenty of other people doing it. I mean, I'm not really in touch with many people, but I'm sure there are people out there with similar things, capturing similar things.
Right, that's very odd. I mean, do other people within ufology accept your work? Are they very interested in what you do? Or
no, it seems that most people just want a nice shiny disc and a little green man shaking the hand. But so no, I mean, well, he was shunned. I mean, he was banned from talking. I think in his native New Zealand and in America. I think people weren't ready to accept the fact that some UFOs, might not be mechanical and they might not be ships from other planets. They're actual biological entities.
John Keel had the same problem because he came up with an idea about what took as an explanation for UFOs that was very, very radical, and at the time everyone was, like I say, into spaceships and aliens, which might be true in some cases. But
well, this is what I thought when I first started looking into it. When I first heard of Trevor James Constable, and I saw that he was talking about UFOs invisible to normal human sight and the fact that they're biological. It blew my mind, to be quite honest with you. And I thought, well, I've got to get out there and film some of these, and that's what started me out on my quest.
Well, I've often wondered. We use terms such as UFO, but it's possible that that might actually be a word which covers of a large number of its separate phenomena.
Oh, definitely.
It's a generic word we use, like ghosts and stuff like that. But what actually falls under that category might, in fact, in reality, be very, very different phenomena, and we've lumped them all together. When really we should be separating them out and dealing with them as separate phenomena.
Well, that's the thing, yeah. I mean, the thing is, it's not taken seriously. A lot of people. I mean, I've not been approached by any, scientific people about my work.
I know the feeling, yeah.
But it's there for people to look at if they want. They can make what they want of them,
You're not going to be on the next episode of Professor Brian Cox Does Science Britannica.
I hope not.
That'll be the day. Yeah, that'll be the day. But I mean, you've suffered like Trevor James Constable. You've had some encounters with some obstacles, and of course this inevitably happens. You've had this ridicule in the media. It's a very, very sad thing that happened. The newspapers and the radio have done this, and it's. Did you feel if you had some other experiences as well? For example, you actually when you travelled, you had some bad experiences in terms of customs and travel and things like that.
Well, that's right. Yeah, I sent my camcorder to a company called Max, which I'd done before for a full spectrum conversion. And the second time I sent them away, I rang up the company to see had it arrived yet, and they said no, it hasn't arrived, and it had been gone for about 2.5 to 3 weeks. And I checked on the website at the airport, Kennedy Airport, and it said it had been taken off for inspection. And it was around that point that I started noticing black cars sitting down the lane where I live.
Oh, right.
I started being followed. This went on for nearly 2 months. I suspect my phone was tapped as well. I kept hearing strange noises on the phone, and I was followed. For several months, and then the camcorder came back, and then I was followed by a whole bunch of different people. 2 guys were getting on the bus, and the bus would stop. One stop down out of Abingdon, and then these 2 guys would get on, and they just stand there staring at me. And they looked very much like military sort of haircuts and holes in the jeans. It didn't look quite right, and like they were trying to be something they weren't. And they followed me everywhere. But I had some fun and games with them.
So. But I mean, it's interesting, like because you had black cars that parked outside on the road where you live. Yeah. That's kind of a cliche, isn't it? The black car.
Well, I wouldn't. Yeah, well, I'd noticed them, but it wasn't until one of the neighbours said to me there's something going on. They look like they're looking down towards your house. And I happened to walk up to the shop one day, and I saw the guy in the front car. There's a guy and a woman, and the guy slipped the walkie-talkie down his side. And as he went by, he said to the woman, "That's the male we're interested in." And I got this horrible sick feeling. And it carried on from there, and then eventually it was all okay, and it seemed to stop. So
it was maybe. I mean, if the thing about the intelligence services, if they want to keep an eye on you and they don't want you to know they're spying on you, you won't know. They're very good at surveillance. I
probably wouldn't know unless I was told that these guys were there day in and day out, and also it's just a long lane, and it's very easy to see if somebody's there that's out of character.
It's possible that they actually wanted you to know they were staring at you in an attempt to intimidate you.
Yeah,
because they have done things like that. And I mean,
definitely. Yeah.
surveillance is very sophisticated. I've known people who've been followed. The police will follow them just as a part of a drill. And one was a girlfriend of a police officer, and he said to his girlfriend the next day, "Oh, did you know someone following you home last night?" And she said, "No." "Oh, there were 6 guys from the force. They were all following you. You didn't know it's good. We weren't supposed to follow them, but it's nothing. No worry, they're just practicing. They normally pick on a random stranger, but I told them to follow you."
Yeah, right.
So it looks like they were trying to intimidate you. They're trying to.
I dare say, yeah. I mean, I'm still not sure whether it's because of the UFO thing or whether it's the fact I studied Arabic and they're coming from the terrorist type thing. I really do. And the fact I got this equipment, they didn't know what I wanted it for.
Yeah. Now, well, anyway, it's very, very interesting to talk to you. And you've got, if people want to know more about you, you have there's several things you can do. Like, what about your book? You've got a book, haven't you?
Yeah, book Quest for the Invisibles. That's the book that came out September 2016. That covers the first 5 years of my work filming in infrared and ultraviolet. I've also got a website which is www.questfortheinvisibles.co.uk. There's also the Quest for the Invisibles YouTube site, which has got live footage on, as well as photographic stills.
Right, some very interesting footage. People can see all these various objects you've recorded. There are pictures, and then some of the video. You've actually produced some of the video for YouTube, which is really, really interesting. Yeah. Okay, so Nick Hayes, thanks very much for talking to me this evening.
Thank you.
And I look forward to hearing your talk at the Highway Paranormal Meetup Group.
Yeah, thank you. I look forward to that as well.
And thank you, everybody, for watching.